So let's keep going with a theory. And so let's talk about conflict theory. And again, this is a little bit of a reiteration. We've discussed conflict theory before. And so Marx believed that there were two main social classes in capitalism. We have the bourgeoisie, the capitalist, who own the means of production. We have the workers or the proletariat, people who sold their labor for wages. So again, Marx believed that ultimately these classes would continue to be divided, social inequality would grow, and that capitalism was the true cause, the true evil in our societies. And so this tends to be very black and white. It's either one thing or another. There's no other categories. And so Weber really expanded this idea, still a conflict theorist, but for him, the Weberian theory is really about how can we understand the cultural factors within these classes. And so for him, a class status was about three components. It was wealth or privilege, having money, assets, etc. Power, being able to have influence in politics, being able to have a say. And then we have prestige. If your career, your occupation is a prestigious one, is it revered in our society? And so some people may have one of these, but not others. And then, but most often, the most powerful and successful people will have all three. And so here is a research on social prestige in the US. And so it's really just kind of showing where do we land on this score of who's the most prestigious or honored. And of course, we have physician, lawyer, professor, architect, dentist, member of the clergy, pharmacist, registered nurse. Then we have blue collar. And I think blue collar tend to be like an athlete. It's not the blue collar in the traditional sense, but they tend not to have like a high education necessity to be in that field. Engineer, vegetarian, airplane pilot, sociologist, police officer, actor, social worker, cashier, etc. And so we can see, of course, at the bottom would be something like a janitor and a waitress compared to someone who's a lawyer. And so it's really about the perception of society and what the culture values as an occupation. We have functionalism, and so functionalists view class inequality as a positive, and they're trying to see what good comes of class inequality. And for them, there's two things. Certain roles are more important for the functioning of society, and these roles may be more difficult to fill. So they need more incentive. So something like a doctor, they're going to get paid $100,000 because we need these positions filled by the most educated, by the most talented. And that kind of goes into this next point too. There are greater rewards necessary for work that requires more training or skill. And so essentially that we need doctors and we need janitors, and they both fulfill a particular role. And we're going to have doctors that are highly educated and make a lot of money. But then we also need other jobs for the rest of society as well, and that each of these have their own function in their own way. Next is postmodernism and social reproduction. And Bordeaux really talks about how we pass down culture from one generation to the other. And so for Bordeaux, we tend to see, and I think is really related to symbolic interaction, but postmodernism is its own theory. We don't talk too much about postmodernism here. But social reproduction is the tendency for social class status to be passed down from one generation to the next. So we learn this through culture, through interactions, through socializations. The next concept that he talks about is cultural capital. Cultural capital are taste, habits, expectations, skills, knowledge, other things around culture. And so each class has its own cultural capital. And those things are passed down. And having cultural capital gives us an advantage in our society. And so, kind of going back to this idea that if you abide to dominant culture and middle class values, then you're going to be easily more successful because you know the expectations of that class compared to someone who grew up in a lower class or in the underclass and does not know those expectations, does not know how to navigate those things. And so Verdot argues that cultural capital can either help you or hinder you as we become adults. Okay, and so this clip is going to talk a little bit about the 3 different types of cultural capital and trying to explain it and how it can help you or harm you. And I think what's interesting is that, and more research has come out about cultural capital, and is that it's not that either you have it or you don't, it's that cultural capital looks differently for different people, right? And different classes are going to value different things. So maybe the lower class values something more like respect, loyalty, honesty, right? You keeping it 100, right? Those kind of things, like I want you to keep it real with me, and so those kind of things compared to something like middle class values that is about respecting authority, respecting obedience, manners, professionalism, understanding the rank and file, or like the hierarchy. And so it just means it's different. It just doesn't look the same. Okay, then we have symbolic interactionists. And I think these are really, really aligned with cultural capital. And so symbolic interactionists examine the way we use our status differences to categorize ourselves or others. And so for Goffman, we talked a little bit about this before as well, that our clothing, speech, gestures, possessions, friends, and activities provide us information about our socioeconomic status. So if I ask you, what's your hobby? If I have someone who says golf, then I can have an idea of what social class they're a part of compared to something like basketball or soccer. But even within those, right, we have something like travel teams and travel ball that if you're a part of those leagues, you tend to have more financial resources. And so some of that may vary as well. But those are all things to think about. Again, clothing, having particular brands, particular cars, all those things signify messages to the rest of a society about what class you're in, right? Okay, and so these theories are just going to help us understand how class is viewed and how people are viewed based on those classes. Okay, that wraps up this section.